The bright celebration lights of New Sol Station danced across the darkness of space like scattered diamonds. It was the year 2387, and all of humanity was celebrating. 200 years ago, they had first met alien races and joined the great Galactic Confederation. Now, Earth was part of a huge family of star-traveling civilizations. Commander Li Hun pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. He watched the party ships floating outside the deep space communications array, but something felt wrong. The pit of his stomach churned with worry, though he could not say why. Maybe it was the way the stars seemed dimmer tonight, or how the usual chatter from distant worlds had grown quieter over the past few weeks. The celebration around him continued. Holographic fireworks exploded in brilliant colors while children laughed and pointed at the alien ships that had come to join the festivities. Representatives from 12 different species mingled in the station's main hall, their various forms creating a rainbow of galactic diversity. The air hummed with translation devices converting dozens of languages into perfect understanding. But Heian could not shake his unease. The command center doors burst open with a sharp hiss. Dr. Park Minji rushed in, her usually neat black hair disheveled and her face pale as winter snow. She clutched a data pad in her trembling hands, and her eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. "Commander, we have a serious problem," she said, her voice cutting through the cheerful noise of the holographic displays that showed party footage from across human space. "The Altair colonies have gone completely silent. Total communications blackout." Heian turned away from the window, his celebration mood evaporating like mist. "Equipment failure?" he asked, though his gut already knew the answer would be worse than that. Minji shook her head quickly. "That was my first thought, too. I ran every diagnostic we have. The equipment is working perfectly on our end. But, Commander, it is not just Altair anymore. The problem is spreading." She activated the main display screen, and the cheerful party footage disappeared. Instead, a map of known space appeared, dotted with thousands of communication nodes that normally pulsed with steady green light. But now, too many of them showed red, dark red, meaning no signal at all. "Vega system went dark 3 hours ago," Minji continued, pointing at the map. "Then Proxima Centauri. Even the primary Confederation communication nodes have stopped responding. Look at this pattern." The map showed the silence spreading like a disease through the galaxy. System after system, world after world, going quiet. The communication networks that had carried voices, data, trade agreements, and friendly messages for 2 centuries were dying one by one. Hyun felt his blood turn cold. "How many systems?" 47 and counting, Minji whispered. "Commander, civilizations that have existed for millions of years are just vanishing from our networks. Trade ships that were supposed to arrive at scheduled ports never showed up. The interstellar highways that were always busy with traffic had become empty. Over the next several days, the pattern became impossible. To ignore what had started as technical problems became something far more terrifying. The party atmosphere on New Sol Station died as news spread. Families with relatives in the outer colonies gathered around communication stations, hoping for any word, but none came. The bustling trade routes that connected thousands of worlds fell silent. Ships that should have been carrying goods, passengers, and messages simply stopped arriving. Space traffic control centers reported empty shipping lanes, where once hundreds of vessels traveled daily. Hyun barely slept as reports flooded in. The Centauri Trade Alliance had evacuated their stations overnight, leaving behind empty crystal cities floating in space. The wise Kepler Collective, known for their ancient knowledge, had abandoned their great libraries. Even the powerful military coalition from the Hercules sector had pulled back all their fleets and disappeared. It was as if the entire galaxy was running away from something. Then came the final transmission. Minji was monitoring the emergency channels when the message arrived. It came through the Confederation's highest priority communication system, crackling with strange interference that made the speakers buzz and hiss. The voice was distorted, speaking in the ancient diplomatic language that all Confederation members knew. "Attention, Earth," the voice said, filled with what sounded like desperate sadness. The devourers wake from their long slumber between the stars. We retreat to the safe dimensions where they cannot follow us. Earth, we are deeply sorry. You cannot come with us. Your technology is not advanced enough. Forgive us for leaving you behind. The transmission ended with a sound like tearing metal, then came the silence, complete. Total, absolute silence. Every communication channel that had buzzed with life for 200 years went dead. The galaxy-spanning network that connected billions of beings across thousands of worlds simply stopped working. Not because of equipment failure, but because there was no one left to send messages. Humanity found itself utterly alone in a galaxy that had suddenly become a vast graveyard of abandoned worlds. The celebration lights of new Sol stations still flickered, but now they seemed like the last candles burning in an empty cathedral. The stars were still there, but they no longer felt friendly. They felt cold and distant, like the eyes of strangers. Who had turned away Captain Kim? J1 walked back and forth across the bridge of the battleship Taegji like a caged tiger. His boots made sharp clicking sounds on the metal floor as reports kept coming in from every corner of human space. Each new message brought worse news than the last. The main screen showed empty space where busy alien cities used to be. Yesterday, the beautiful crystal towers of the Centauri trade stations had sparkled like jewels in the darkness. Thousands of alien merchants, diplomats, and travelers had filled their halls with noise and life. Now they stood completely empty, as if their people had simply vanished into thin air. Captain called Lieutenant Choi Soo-jin from her seat at the communications station. Her young face looked worried as she stared at her screens. I am picking up something strange. Automated distress beacons are activating all around the Rim territories. These are not normal emergency signals, sir. J1 stopped pacing and turned to face her. What kind of signals? Ancient ones, Captain. Really ancient. Some of these warning systems are over 1 million years old. They have been sleeping in dead space for longer than humans have existed. But now, they are all waking up at once, and they are all saying the same thing. The bridge became very quiet. Even the usual hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade as everyone waited. The crew members at their stations stopped what they were doing and looked up at the main display screen. Slowly, words appeared on the screen. As the ship's computers worked to translate the ancient alien languages, the message was simple, but it made everyone's blood run cold. Beware the darkness between stars. They consume all things. They devour reality. Flee to the inner dimensions while you still can. The same warning repeated over and over, broadcast by warning systems that had been built by civilizations so old that even their names were forgotten. These ancient races had faced something terrible enough to make them build warnings that would last for millions of years. Dr. Yoon Harry, the fleet's chief scientist who studied alien life, looked up from her datapad with growing fear in her eyes. She was a small woman with gray hair, but she knew more about alien species than almost anyone alive. Captain, she said in a quiet voice, I have been studying these messages and comparing them with our records. These warnings talk about entities that do not exist completely in our normal space and time. They are something that lives partially outside our reality. What does that mean exactly? Jaewon asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. Harry took a deep breath before continuing. The advanced alien species, the ones who have been our friends and teachers for 200 years, they have technology we cannot even understand. They can travel to parallel dimensions, to other realities where these creatures cannot reach them. When danger comes, they can simply step sideways out of our universe. She paused and looked around at the faces of the crew. But us, Captain, do not have that technology. We cannot escape to other dimensions. We're stuck here in normal space. The truth hit everyone at the same time. Alien races had not just left because they were scared. They had run to places where humans could not follow, even if they wanted. 2. Humanity had been abandoned, not by choice, but because they were simply not advanced enough to escape. On Earth.
Ow.
Billions of people watched their screens as President Oh Sang-ho prepared to speak to the world. The president was an older man, with kind eyes. But today those eyes looked tired and worried. He stood behind a simple podium in the blue house, with the flag of Earth hanging behind him. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice steady despite the fear that everyone could see in his face. "We stand at the edge of our greatest challenge. The elder races of the galaxy, civilizations that have lived among the stars for millions of years, have fled from a threat they could not face." He paused and looked directly into the camera, speaking to every human alive. "But we are not them. We do not have their ancient wisdom or their powerful technology. What we have is something different. We have the human spirit. We have the courage that has carried us from caves to the stars. And humans, my friends, humans do not run." The speech was broadcast to every human settlement, from the great cities of Earth to the small mining stations on distant asteroids, in living rooms and meeting halls and space stations and underground bunkers. People listened to their leader's words and felt a small spark of hope in the darkness. But far from Earth, at the very edge of the solar system, something was happening that made hope seem very fragile. Long-range sensors on the outer monitoring stations began detecting things that should not exist. Space itself was acting strangely in several areas. The readings showed regions where light seemed to bend in impossible ways before simply disappearing. Stars that should have been visible were no longer there, not because they had moved or died, but as if they had never existed at all. The darkness between stars was no longer empty. Something was coming. The research vessel. Magangwa floated silently through the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system. It was humanity's most advanced ship, packed with the best sensors and equipment that Earth could build. The ship had been sent to investigate the strange readings that were coming from the Kuiper Belt, where thousands of asteroids normally drifted in their slow dance around the sun. Commander Bae Dasam stood on the bridge, staring at her instrument. Panels with growing horror. The numbers on her screens made no sense. They showed readings that should have been impossible according to everything humans knew about physics and space. "Dr. Shin," she called to the ship's physicist, her voice tight with worry. "What exactly am I looking at here? These readings cannot be correct." Dr. Shin Kiwook was hunched over his workstation, his hands shaking as he tried to understand the data flowing across his screens. He was a brilliant scientist who had spent his whole life studying how the universe worked, but what he was seeing now broke every rule he had ever learned. "Commander," he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "space itself is falling apart out there. Matter is being consumed, but this is not like anything we have ever seen before. Things are not just being destroyed or blown up. It is like they never existed at all. The very fabric of reality is collapsing." Dasam felt her stomach drop. "Do you mean never existed?" Kiwook pointed at his screens with a trembling finger. "The quantum foam, the basic building blocks of space and time, they are disappearing. When something gets consumed by whatever is out there, it does not leave. Behind debris or energy, it just stops being real." Through the main view screen, they could see what he was talking about. Far ahead of them was a patch of darkness that was different from the normal black of empty space. This darkness was absolute, complete, and it hurt. To look at directly was like someone had cut a hole in reality itself, leaving behind nothing at all. As they watched in terrified silence, a large asteroid slowly drifted toward the dark patch. The space rock was the size of a small mountain, made of iron and stone that had been floating through space for billions of years. When it touched the edge of the darkness, something impossible happened. The asteroid did not explode. It did not break apart or melt or get crushed. It simply was not there anymore. One moment it existed solid and real, and the next moment there was nothing. Not even empty space where it used to be, just more of that terrible darkness. "The Devourers," Dasam whispered, remembering the ancient warnings they had received. "They are real." More asteroids drifted into the void and vanished, without a trace. Each time the patch of darkness grew slightly larger, like a hungry mouth that expanded with every meal. The crew of the Mugangwa watched in silent horror as their universe was slowly eaten away. Then the darkness noticed them. A tendril of living shadow reached out from the void. moving toward their ship like a snake made of pure nothingness. It was not fast, but it moved with a terrible purpose that made everyone on the bridge freeze with fear. All engines, full reverse. Dosam shouted. She knew they could not outrun something that existed partially outside normal space. The shadow touched the outer hull of the Mugangwa, and immediately the ship's metal began to dissolve. But not like acid or fire would dissolve. The whole simply stopped existing wherever the shadow touched it. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as sections of the outer walls vanished. But then something strange happened. The dissolving process began to stutter and slow down, like a machine that had encountered an error it could not handle, Captain. Kiwook shouted over the noise of the alarms. Look at these readings. Quantum resonance of our crew's brain patterns is creating some kind of interference. The entity cannot fully process human consciousness. Dawson stared at the data in amazement. Every human brain creates unique patterns of electrical activity, and somehow these patterns were confusing the creature that was trying to consume them. The Devourers seemed to have trouble understanding how human minds worked. In that moment of realization, Dosam made a decision that would change the course of humanity's survival. She activated the ship's communication system and spoke to every person on board. All hands, listen carefully, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. Focus on staying human. Think chaotic thoughts. Remember things that contradict each other. Think about how you can love someone and be angry at them at the same time. Remember beautiful things and terrible things together. Make yourselves impossible to understand. The crew did not fully understand what she meant, but they followed her orders. They thought about their families and their fears. They remembered. Happy memories mixed with sad ones. They let their minds wander through all the contradictions that made them human. The effect was immediate. The shadow creature recoiled from the ship as if it had been burned. It pulled back its tendrils and seemed to hesitate, confused by minds that could hold two opposite ideas at the same time. That could create beauty while thinking about destruction, that could hope and despair in the same moment. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity had found something the Devourers could not easily consume: the beautiful, chaotic contradiction of human consciousness. Admiral Go Yunji stood in the command center of her flagship, watching the red surface of Mars through the large viewing windows. Around the planet, hundreds of human ships floated in defensive formations, their lights twinkling like stars against the darkness. It was the largest gathering of Earth's military forces in history, but Yanji knew it might not be enough. The Devourers had already consumed 3 of the outer moons. Phobos, Deimos, and Europa had simply vanished, leaving behind patches of that terrible darkness that hurt to look at. But something strange was happening. The creatures advanced toward the inner planets had slowed down significantly once they started encountering more human settlements. Admiral called Colonel Nam Tehan, her trusted aide who had served with her for over 10 years. He hurried across the bridge with a datapad in his hands and excitement in his voice. Dr. Kong's research team has made a breakthrough. She says it could change everything. A moment later, the air above the command table shimmered, and a 3-dimensional image of Dr. Kong So-young appeared. The hologram showed a tired woman with messy hair and dark circles under her eyes. She had clearly been working without sleep for days, but her eyes burned with the intensity of discovery. Admiral Dr. Kang began without any greeting, her voice crackling slightly through the communication system. We have finally figured out why we are still alive when entire galactic civilizations fell within hours of encountering these creatures. Yunji leaned forward, giving the scientist her full attention. Around the bridge, other officers stopped their work to listen. Everyone knew that Dr. Kong was one of the smartest people in human space, and if she had answers, they needed to hear them. Go on, Doctor, Yunji said. Dr. Kong activated a display that showed various alien species they had known over the past 2 centuries. Every other intelligent species we have ever encountered followed a similar evolutionary path. They achieved what we might call perfection through cosmic harmony. They evolved to be in perfect balance with the universal forces around them. The hologram showed images of the graceful Centauri people who moved like dancers and thought in mathematical harmony. Then came the wise Kepler collective, whose minds worked in perfect logic and order. Each alien race had found a way to exist in complete balance with the cosmos. Their minds work like beautiful symphonies, Dr. Kong continued. Every thought fits perfectly with every other thought. Their emotions, their logic, their creativity, everything flows together in perfect order. To the devourers, they are like organized meals that are easy to digest and consume, and humans. Admiral Yunji asked. What? Though something in her gut already knew the answer would be different. Dr. Kong smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Admiral, we are cosmic anomalies. We are the universe's mistake, and that mistake is saving us. She changed the display to show human brain scans, and the difference was immediately obvious. Where alien minds showed smooth, ordered patterns, human brains were chaos. Thoughts jumped around randomly, emotions crashed into logic and created new ideas. Creativity and destruction danced together in the same moment. Our evolutionary path was shaped by contradiction, Dr. Kang explained, her excitement growing. We can feel love and hate for the same person simultaneously. We can create beautiful art while planning for war. We can believe in hope while preparing for disaster. Logic and emotion do not just coexist in our minds. They fight and dance and create something new every second. Colonel Nem looked confused. But doctor, how does that help us? The devourers cannot process us because we do not make sense, Dr. Kang said, her voice rising with triumph. They are designed to consume ordered consciousness, minds that follow predictable patterns. But human minds are living paradoxes. We think thoughts that contradict themselves. We feel emotions that should cancel each other out but somehow exist. Together, Admiral Yunji began to understand. You were saying we confuse them? More than that, Dr. Kang replied. We give them mental indigestion when they try to consume human consciousness. It is like trying to eat something that changes. Flavor every time they bite it. They're too chaotic, too unpredictable, too impossible to fully digest. The doctor's next words made everyone on the bridge lean forward with attention. Admiral, I believe we can turn this into a weapon, human consciousness. When properly focused and channeled through quantum crystalline matrices, creates fields that actively disrupt their feeding process. We can make ourselves not just hard to consume, but actually painful for them to touch. She showed them designs for new devices that looked like a combination of computer and meditation tool. These consciousness amplifiers can take the natural chaos of human thoughts and project it outward. Instead of just protecting ourselves, we can create zones where the devourers cannot operate at all. The first test came an hour later when Lieutenant Park Jong-soo volunteered to try the prototype device. He was a young pilot whose fighter had been damaged in the previous battle. When a small devourer tendril approached the testing area, Jong-soo activated the amplifier and focused on everything that made him human. He thought about his love for his family and his fear of losing them. He remembered the beauty of Earth's sunsets and the ugliness of war. He felt hope for the future and sadness for what had been lost. All at the same time, the devourer tendril touched the edge of his consciousness field and immediately recoiled, as if it had been burned. For the first time since the crisis began, humanity had made one of these creatures retreat. Earth floated like a precious blue marble in the endless black of space, as the largest wave of devourers humanity had ever seen moved slowly toward the solar system. This was it, the final battle. Every human being alive, from the newest babies to the oldest grandparents, was about to face the creatures that had consumed entire galactic civilizations. Commander. Lee Hoon stood in the rebuilt communications array of new Sol Station, feeling the weight of 17 billion lives on his shoulders. Around him, most brilliant minds humanity had ever produced worked frantically at their stations. Dr. Park. Minji checked and rechecked the quantum communication networks. Admiral Goyunji coordinated the final defensive positions of Earth's fleets. Dr. Kang Soyoung made last-minute adjustments to the consciousness amplification systems that would either save humanity or witness their final moments. Through the station's windows, Heian could see the approaching darkness. It was not like the small patches they had fought before. This was a wall of absolute nothingness that stretched across space, consuming stars and planets as it moved. Where it passed, reality itself ceased to exist. Commander Minji said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. All systems are ready. Every human settlement in the solar system is connected to the network. From the great cities of Earth to the smallest mining stations on distant asteroids, everyone is linked together. Hyun nodded and activated the communication system that would reach every human being alive. His voice would be heard in living rooms and battle stations, in schools and hospitals, in spaceships and underground bunkers. My fellow humans, he began, his words carrying to 17 billion people. Today we face the darkness not as separate nations or colonies, but as one species. We're about to attempt something that has never been done before. We are going to link every human mind together and show these creatures what it truly means to be human. On Earth, families gathered around their communication screens. Children held their parents' hands while elderly grandparents closed their eyes and prepared to share their lifetime of memories. Soldiers on the front lines took deep breaths and opened their minds to their fellow warriors. Scientists and artists, farmers and teachers, everyone prepared to become part of something larger than themselves. Begin the consciousness network initialization, Minji announced across all human settlements. The quantum entanglement systems that Dr. Kong had designed came online one by one. Invisible connections formed between every human brain, linking thoughts and emotions across impossible distances. A child's laughter on Mars, connected to a soldier's determination on Earth. An artist's creativity in the asteroid belt merged with an engineer's logic on Luna. 17 billion human minds became one vast network of consciousness that stretched across the entire solar system. But this was not the ordered, harmonious connection that other alien species might have created. This was pure, chaotic, beautiful human experience in all its contradictory glory. The Devourers reached the outer edge of the network and began their feeding process, expecting another simple meal of organized consciousness like they had consumed from every other species. Instead, they encountered something that made no sense to their ancient, logical minds. They tried to consume a grandmother's love for her family and found it mixed with her worry about their future. They attempted to digest a soldier's courage and discovered it was intertwined with his fear of death. They reached for a child's innocent joy and found it dancing alongside an adult's knowledge of the world's cruelty. Every human emotion, memory, and thought crashed into the Devourer's consciousness like a storm of impossibility. They tasted love and hate existing in the same heart. They tried to process minds that could believe in beautiful dreams while planning for terrible realities. They encountered thoughts that could create art while contemplating war. Hope that existed alongside despair. Logic that danced with pure emotion. The network pulsed with 17 billion different perspectives on what it meant to be alive. A poet's words about beauty merged with a scientist's equations about destruction. A musician's harmony combined with a rebel's discord, parents' protective love mixed with teenagers' rebellious anger. The Devourers convulsed in what could only be described as cosmic indigestion. They had evolved to consume ordered, predictable consciousness, but humanity offered them pure chaos. Every time they tried to digest one human thought, it changed into something else. Every emotion they attempted to process contradicted itself, Young girls wonder at seeing her first rainbow connected to an old man's sadness at seeing his last sunset. A warrior's determination to fight linked to a peacemaker's hope for understanding. Joy and sorrow, creation and destruction, wisdom and foolishness, all existing simultaneously in the vast web of human consciousness. The creatures that had devoured entire galactic clusters began to retreat. They pulled back from the solar system like animals fleeing from something that burned them. For the first time in their ancient existence, it encountered prey that they could not consume. The wall of darkness that had approached Earth began to break apart and withdraw toward the empty spaces between galaxies. The Devourers fled from the one thing in the universe they could not understand or digest. the beautiful, possible contradiction of human nature. As the last of the creatures disappeared into the deep void, the consciousness network slowly dissolved. 17 billion minds returned to their individual selves, but they carried with them the memory of being part of something greater. Humanity had faced the darkness alone and discovered that sometimes being imperfect was exactly what the universe needed.